Next talk for this slot is from Marlowe, who was previous artist for Roguelike Celebration, designed some of my favorite shirts. They're all my favorite shirts, unless I'm talking to you, and then your shirt is, of course, my favorite shirt.
Yes,
But
that's right.
yes, also working at Megacrit on art director for Slay the Spire 2, which, of course, I think surely everyone here is quite excited about, and worked on Dicey Dungeons and Floppy Nights, so some real roguelike classics the last while here, and going to talk about visual concepts for enemies and roguelikes. Very exciting.
That's right. Awesome. Hello, everybody. I'm Marlo, and thanks for stumbling into my talk here. A swarm of monsters is hard to build, generating visual concepts for enemies in roguelikes. Let's just get to it. So, I had a lovely introduction, but I might repeat some information here. Who am I? I am an artist and animator and art director. I've worked on titles such as Dicey Dungeons and Floppy Nights. Currently, I'm art directing for Slay the Spire 2. When I'm not doing all of that, I'm an officer for the Portland Indie Game Squad, which is the Portland indie scene here locally in Portland, but also online. And I also am a developer of a bunch of random itch games, some of which you can see at the bottom of this slide here. So, the games that I work on have so many monsters. On the left here, you can see some of the monsters I designed for Dicey Dungeons, and on the right are some monsters I designed for Floppy Nights. These are both games that I worked on back to back. As you can see, there's a lot of enemies in them. And of course, as I'm working on Slay the Spire 2, I wrote here plus 5 million others, give or take a couple million. You can see the few that we've been able to share so far. We're already starting to build out a huge cast of characters for these games. So I think a really important thing when you're doing art for roguelikes is these games are highly replayable by nature. You really want to make sure that the art doesn't feel stale. You're not seeing the same three enemies over and over and over again. And so generating these sort of huge swarms of monsters, if you will, is a really great way to kind of keep it feeling fresh visually while you're playing through these games repeatedly. So how do you keep the well of ideas from running dry? How do you generate ideas? With these huge casts of monsters that we're talking about here, it can be really intimidating to say, like, sit down, come up with 50 ideas for different visual designs for monsters. I think that would be pretty impossible for most of us to just like sit down and just like go from A to Z and make an entire cast of enemies like that. So, spoiler alert, for professional creatives, ideas aren't usually these magical things that just appear or materialize from thin air. Generating ideas is actually a skill that you can practice, and we are going to be doing that during this talk. So, the techniques that I'm going to go over, there are countless ways you can practice to generate ideas. I will be going over my 3 favorite techniques that have worked well for me personally. So these are my go-tos, my bread and butter. These are the things that can kind of like help me get the creative juices flowing when I need to come up with kind of character or enemy designs. These techniques are list of 10, referencing game mechanics, and of course visual reference. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be describing each of these techniques. I'm going to be showing you a little example of how to do them and a character that came from them, and then we are actually going to use one of them and design a character live. I'm going to do some live drawing as part of this, so hold on to your hats for that. That's coming up soon. But the first technique, the list of 10, the list of 10 is an ideation technique in which you write down the first 10 ideas that come to mind, no matter how good or bad they may be. The key to using the list of 10 technique is to not filter your ideas or think too much about them. The goal is to write down ideas in a sort of stream of consciousness state that allows you to unblock your brain. So in the end, when you're done with this practice, you will have a list of 10 ideas, and more likely than not, a handful of them will be inspiring or useful to you. And I really just want to reiterate, you do not need to worry about the quality of these ideas. It's just the first 10 things that come to mind. So here's an example I did, a list of 10 random ideas off the dome. So I wrote down Lil Snail, construction materials, weeds, sentient cave, floating, guy in a hole, clouds, bioluminescent, galactic, and street fashion. I don't know what it says about me that these are the first 10 things I thought of, but as you can see, these are not really like complicated ideas. They're more conceptual, they're really loose. I'm not sitting down and like describing all the details of a character and enemy. I'm just like, here's some vibes on a page. So based off this list, I chose weeds, clouds, and galactic because I was like looking at this, like this word is giving me some ideas. Seeing it next to this word's giving me some ideas. Not really crazy about these other ones. They're not doing anything for me. So this is what we're going to work with. So here on the right is the character that I drew based on these 3 words from our list of 10. And I did a little speed paint video here. This is about a 20-minute drawing session. I used the words weeds, clouds, and galactic again. And yeah, I was kind of inspired by like doing this sort of like dandelion kind of enemy, clouds having it sort of be like this floaty godlike being with his like cloud collars and bracers, and then galactic I was actually really inspired by like using the star shape for the eyes and the head. And yeah, this is the result. It's kind of an interesting weird character I can put in my roguelike RPG. It didn't exist before I did this list of 10, so I had no idea where it was going to go, and it's pretty cool that you can kind of just come out the other end of that with a word association project and have a whole character design that you can work with. So the second technique is referencing game mechanics. Sometimes you have information about your character before you design them. This can be a backstory, lore, or even just like technical design mechanics. So maybe your character comes from a specific region in your world. Maybe they have a particular profession. Maybe they do AoE damage or big heavy attacks. And if this is the case, we can reference that information to influence the design of our characters. So kind of all those things I listed would be really great examples of jumping off points that you can use to inspire the visuals of your characters. And oftentimes when you're working with a team, that kind of will happen. Like you'll have a design, they'll know how the enemy needs to act, but they don't have a visual design for it, and you'll have this information going into your character design phase. So here's a character I came up with using the game mechanics reference. The first thing I did to practice this is I just made these example mechanics on the left here. I said, let's make a weak enemy encounter that does multi-hit attacks, dealing small damage. The attacks are poisonous, and it has a defensive state when not attacking. So this is kind of emblematic of some of the information you might have when you're going into designing an enemy. And I interpreted that in that it's a weak enemy. It's gotta not look very intimidating. We're gonna give it these like really sad, droopy eyes and kind of have him look, a little sad. The multi-hit attacks I interpreted as having these tentacles that could maybe like, I could see it being animated to do like 4 hits really fast with each of the tentacles. Obviously, he looks pretty poisonous. I had thought, oh, it could be this like poison goopy potion spilling out of an upside down cauldron. And then in the defensive state mechanic, I had thought I could design something that could maybe like it could suck up back into the cauldron when it's not attacking, and that would be its defensive state. So yeah, I think that something like this would kind of hit all of the check boxes of what this enemy's mechanics might be. And again, it's something that just didn't exist, 20 minutes ago when we made our example mechanics list and did the drawing. And then the third concept I'm going to go over is definitely the most detailed, so bear with me here. It's visual reference, not as straightforward as it seems. But yeah, it's just the practice of collecting visual reference material that you can be inspired by. I do this from a variety of different sources. Generally, I'm looking for images online. I wrote glossy JPEGs, but you can feel free and do any file type that you like. I actually have a personal Discord with a channel in it that I have just like an images channel where I paste all these images I find online that I really like, that I find inspiring. And I'd encourage you to try that out. I also would encourage you to keep a local version of these things because nothing is permanent online or in apps. And then the second one I have here is books. I'm a huge collector of art books and reference material, so it can be like art books from shows, comics, video games, other artists. Sometimes it's reference like lettering stuff or anatomy books. I know this can be cost prohibitive to kind of build up a library like that. So if you don't really have the money to go throwing around on art books, I would say your local library is a really great source for stuff like that. You can also oftentimes ask your library to buy books for you. And then also there's places like archive.org that have a lot of digital copies and scans or PDFs of art books that you can check out and borrow. So checking out those resources like that and like being able to build a digital library like that is very, very cool too. And the last thing I wrote down here is photo reference. So I use photo reference not just for, say I need to draw a horse or a car and I have completely forgotten what a horse or a car look like and I need to look at a photo to remind myself. But it can also be a really great place to find artistic inspiration. So this photo that I chose from my folder, I just really like the pose. I think the foreshortening is really fun on the leg. I think the fashion is really great in it. Like there's a lot of different things I could pull from something like that to inspire an illustration or an enemy design. And yes, I just want to say it out loud. Reference material is not cheating. I think that for artists and creatives, there can be a lot of anxiety around the idea of like, oh no, I'm like looking at someone else's art, I'm referencing someone else's art. Is that cheating? It is not cheating. Don't be scared of referencing other people's art. There is nothing wrong with being inspired by others' work. It is how art has evolved and developed since the dawn of time. So as long as you're not copying or ripping off your reference material, you will be fine. There is a huge gulf between being inspired by someone's work and plagiarizing them. And quite oftentimes, all you really need to know which of those camps you're in is your common sense, right? Like, don't sweat it so much. So I wrote here some quick tips to remain inspired versus copying. Make sure that you select elements of a piece that you like versus the whole piece. So that's like saying, I really like X, Y, and Z about it, but I'm not going to copy this whole image. I'm not going to try to recreate this whole image like whole cloth. Find reference from many different sources. I had mentioned some of the sources I look at, and I can find that like making sure you're looking at a wide breadth of sources is going to keep you sort of like generally inspired by a lot of stuff rather than like honing in on one thing that you really like. Find reference materials from many different styles, and especially styles different from your own. I think that's really important. It will kind of broaden your horizon of the kind of things that can inspire you, and it'll also keep you from like feeling that urge to copy stuff if it's something that's very different from the work that you already make. Use multiple different references at once. Oftentimes when I'm doing this, like no joke, I will have anywhere from like 3 to 15 reference images when I'm designing one enemy. I'll like have them all open in Photoshop and I'll have my little drawing in the corner and I'll like those will all kind of feed into one design. And do not trace. I think that's an obvious one, but just wanted to say it. Make sure you're not tracing others' work and you're just kind of using it as a reference, looking at it with your eyes. The goal is to kind of see art and internalize it, be inspired by it, and, you know, work on your stuff with your own hand. So an example I put here for the fine art fans in the audience is a painting by Gauguin and a painting by Van Gogh. These are two artists that have a well-documented friendship. They were inspired by each other. They were inspired by similar things. They like saw each other's work and worked together a lot. And I think with these two paintings, you can tell, like you can kind of see how they're inspired by each other and how they're pulling from a lot of similar things, but their work is very different. And that's kind of like the ideal relationship to have with art and other artists, in my opinion. So what makes a good piece of visual reference? When I am collecting visual references, I tend to look for things that inspire me, such as character clothing and accessories, shapes and silhouettes, meaning like what's the shape of the body, what's the silhouette of the whole character, color palettes of an illustration, facial body features or body types, how things are rendered. And when I say rendered, I mean like, is the line work really sketchy or is it really like loose or is it very painterly or is it very flat? Like those are different rendering styles. I also look for poses a lot. I find I'm very inspired by poses in art. And remember, just to reiterate, it's better to look at parts you like versus the whole. I find it even more helpful to look at reference material that is a very different style than my own. Helps me to avoid the urge to copy things one for one. So this image from my folder on the right here, I really like the color palette. I think the off-white they use is really cool. The angle is very interesting, like this sort of fisheye lens pose on the character. And I also just really like the way that they drew the eyes. So I might take any one of those pieces from this and be inspired by it, but I'm not going to be copying this whole image, right? So we are going to do an example live. So I selected 3 images and we're going to design a character based on them. And if you're feeling brave, you can follow along with me too in your own art projects. So this first image I selected because I really like this like castle structure. I think the little flag at the top is fun. The overall shape was really inspiring to me. The center image, I really like the character silhouette. He's got big hands and a funny head, which was enough for me to put it on the list. And then this last image here, I really like the color palette. I really like the lighting. I think I want to try to like emulate that a little bit while I'm doing my character design. So we'll see how successful we are because it's live drawing time. Pick up your pens, your tablets. Looks like this is all working fine. I've got my Photoshop file ready to go here. So we're just going to see what we can do with a short little bit of drawing time. And I've got a timer so I make sure I don't go over. So yeah, I'm going to start. I said I was very inspired by this guy's big funny head. And I think I can kind of make that work with this castle shape. So I'm going to start with the character's head being like this maybe long castle shape here. And I'd be very curious if anybody else does decide to follow along. If they draw something completely different than I do, which I bet they would. Okay, maybe there can be like, this is where the face is. There's like a little hole in the bottom of the castle tower. I'll just draw a little placeholder face for now. Bear with me. Cool, we'll give him a little funny body. I think he's going to be made entirely of castle material. So he's going to be like bricks all the way down. I like this door too. So I think I'm going to like give him a little tummy drawer. Perhaps this is where the food goes when he eats. We're making lore for a character right away. So he's probably pretty heavy. I'm going to give him big legs. I think he needs like little shoulder. Oh, I'm going to make the shoulders kind of copy the top of the castle. I don't know what you call that. The rampart. The little castle zigzag tops. And then another thing I really like about this sort of alien on the left is I like his really skinny arms that kind of turn into these big hands. If you remember, I said big hands funny or something to that effect. So I'm going to try to kind of give him these big arms. Oh my gosh. I like this guy. He seems a bit like a bruiser. Okay. So we've got a general concept here. That wasn't so bad. So now I'm going to turn this down. Let's bring this in a little bit. I'm going to zoom in. So I'm going to start referencing this illustration I have on the left here for colors. So let's do, pardon me, I'm going to start color picking off this. So I like this dark purple here. I think that could be a fun line work color to use instead of just a pure black. So let's go in and clean this guy up a little bit. Okay, we're doing good for time. This is going to be a quick one, a little quicker than the 20 minutes, but I think you'll get the idea. And oftentimes when I'm doing this for work too, the end goal of this kind of stuff is not to like come out at the end of it with like a perfectly rendered, ready to put in the game character, but rather something that it's like you can get the vibe across, you can show it to your team, and they'll understand what you're going for when you say like, hey, this I came up with this character design. Is this a yes or a no? Okay, I want to give him big funny eyes. That's the mood I'm in. Yes, like this. Oh my gosh, okay. All right, just do our little shoulders nice and quick. Our big beefy, well, our skinny to beefy arms. And you can kind of also start to imagine what kind of mechanics would go with someone like this. I had mentioned, yeah, he kind of looks like a bruiser. He could probably get you. Definitely stomps around. Maybe he's a giant that you fight at some point. And you can kind of already start to get a sense too for, like, I'm really obviously being heavily inspired by these pieces that I picked, but I think we can all agree that this is a very different creature that has come out of this than what any of the reference materials might suggest, right? We are certainly not copying anything here. Okay, big legs. Nice and quick. He's kind of cute. I don't know if I want to fight him actually. Oh my gosh, the quickest ever little brick patterns you've ever seen. Okay, cool. And then I think when I'm just gonna do like some really quick flat colors on him or something. I like this red a lot in this image, so let's grab that and just give him a big flat red. And this is kind of fun because I think that if I didn't have this reference image here, I probably wouldn't think to draw like a castle character red. Like I probably would have done a gray or a brown or something like that. But since I was like, oh, I really like this color palette, I'm kind of going outside of my comfort zone. Trying something a little goofy here. Maybe it makes him more sinister. And then I think I'm going to grab this yellow. Let's do his little eyes. Ooh, yes. His little eyes. And then I think I'm going to grab this pink that's down here. You see this gradient from red to pink and do a little bit of like just quick shadows where there might be shadows on him. I really like the pink with this red. I would keep that. That's a fun little combo. Then another thing I mentioned, I really liked the rim lighting in this illustration. And when I say that, I mean sort of these like lights on the edges. I like this hot green that they're using to like light the edges of the character. So I'm going to grab that and try to like replicate that a little bit here. Give him a little bit of fun detail lighting as if he's being lit from behind. Just a little bit of detail work to kind of push that concept over the edge. A little bit of cleanup. Oh yeah, he needs, gonna color pick again, needs some bars for the tummy. And oh yes, and then I also said I liked the flags in that one illustration, so let's pop some little flags on them too. Can't forget the flags. I like that. We'll color those in with the green. And then yeah, I think that that's pretty set. Of course, angry eyes. Had to do it. But yeah, as you can see, we did it. We came up with a really quick character. I think that was really effective. Yeah, and that's something you could show to your team and say like, hey, is this something we could use as an enemy? You can see it's very different from the 3 reference materials, but you can tell where I pulled from to make this kind of image. So thanks for following along with me. We're going to go back to talk time. I'm just going to wrap up here. I have a few minutes left. So some final thoughts on all of this. Idea generation is a skill that, like any skill, can take some practice. The more you do it, the easier it will be for you. You can try these techniques or experiment with some others, find what works best for your brain. These are just the three, like I said at the beginning, that work really well for me, and you can kind of see how they can be used over and over and over again to different results. Feel free to mix and match the techniques too. I also will oftentimes do like a list of 10, and I'll have reference materials, or I'll have game mechanics, but I'll also do a list of 10 with it. So anything like that, you don't have to limit yourself to just one, kind of just whatever you feel like works best for you in the scenario that you're in. And then I also wrote, be kind to yourself and have fun. You want to keep it playful and loose in the idea generation phase, and it'll allow you to land on more unique ideas that you can take to final. Don't worry about having the perfect idea each time. This is the exploration process, and it will help you get to that perfect idea eventually. So like I said, the end of this is not intended to be like, here's my fully rendered final enemy. It's really to come up with the ideas, only spend a little bit of time on it, rapidly iterate, like take in information and create things. And then the ideal place to be is at the end of it, you have a huge swarm of designs that you can kind of start to pick and choose from on which ones you do want to take to final, or maybe you take 2 of those and mash them up. Like just getting the ideas out and getting the floodgates going is really the goal for all of this. So I do want to thank everybody for chatting with me here today. Here's all the places you can find me. I have a website. I'm on Blue Sky, mostly for social media right now. You can feel free and talk game dev with me at the Pig Squad Discord, which I have the link for right here. And you can also play my weird little games on itch.io. But yeah, I think that leaves us with a little bit of time for QA. So yeah. That's it for me.
Excellent. Love it. I feel physically relaxed after watching. So chat decided that little tower guy looked like a pizza oven because it's got like a pizza tower.
He could shoot pizzas out of his tummy.
Yeah. And
see, we already have mechanics for him. I love it.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love it so much. Please use Pizza Tower Man in any of your games, and
I'll find a way.
Celebration reference.
Yes.
Beautiful. Oh, spinning my microphone. All right. We do have one question. Oh, and this is a really good question from Too Much Tomato.
Cool.
Great name. Do you use a similar process of idea generation for coming up with an art style or direction for the full game?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think that a little bit probably is the answer. Like, yes, you can absolutely do that. One thing I tend to do a lot for deciding on an art direction for the game is mood boards, which I didn't really go over here, but that is sort of the idea of collecting references and just like making a huge mood board of like, really like this painter's style, really like this color palette, like put these all in the same place and then kind of present that to the team I'm working with and say like, is this the vibe we want to go for? And then from there, you kind of like will iterate and add on things or tack off things depending on what direction you go in. But yeah, I guess I would say reference material is the closest technique that I would use for something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Every physical game studio I've worked in has filled the walls with the mood boards that then get replaced with the concept art once you get
that colored printer does a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. Well, excellent. All right. I think that, we will move to the breakout room. So if you're around and if people want to talk about Pizza Tower Man or about all of this extremely useful, relevant advice, they can do so in the Joust Arena. But thank you so much, Marlowe. It was a fantastic talk.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here. Really excited. So thank you so much.